Well, this is our last session, and we're looking at the multilateral response. So we're looking at the multilateral response to the challenges, I guess, we have had over the last 2 years. So with me, I have two very important people. I've Yousra from the Ebrd, the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, and I've Laura from the IFC, the private sector arm of the World Bank. Both multilaterals have very large, significant trade programs reaching into the deep down depths of emerging markets around the world. Actually, just give a small introduction, maybe, Yousra, short.
Thank you very much, Vincent, and hello, everyone. So my name is Yousra Elsayed. As Vincent mentioned, I do represent the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development here based in the UAE. We've been operating across since 1992.
Okay. And Laura?
So I manage IFC investments in financial institutions across the Middle East and Africa region. And so I have been based in Dubai for quite a few years right now, more than 5 years, quite familiar. And this has been very exciting times, both in terms of going through the COVID phase, but also watching the development of UAE and as it expands into the emerging markets. Very exciting times.
Great, Laura. And just to get right into it, Yousra, you know, when we hear the name European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, I think the most people hear their mind kind of thinks of Eastern Europe, Central Europe, maybe out into Central Asia, but quite frankly, we don't think about the Middle East. Are you really serious about the Middle East, if I might ask?
That's very interesting, and I agree, it's quite misleading that we have European in our name, but just to give a bit of perspective, we do operate across 3 continents and 38 countries. The Middle East, which is a region that we call Southern and Eastern Mediterranean, is a very important one for us. Back in 2011, our shareholders decided to expand to this region, and to date we have deployed over $10.5 billion since across projects, so pretty serious about the region, very important and vital for our operation, obviously. We have Egypt, Jordan, Lebanon, West Bank and Gaza, Morocco, hopefully Algeria very soon, and Tunisia as well, so quite active in the region.
Really good. So you are reaching down and reaching south. So, but just to clarify something, when Ebrd is covering the risk between their banks, issuing banks, confirming banks, is it just between, like, frankly, is it a global program or not? You know,
no, it's interesting, and then again, I think I need to mention that the way we've designed it and the way our trade facilitation program has been designed is really to have a global mindset. So we do support trade from, between, and to our regions where we operate. So it is, yes, truly a global program. And if I can just give you an example, we have today over 100 issuing banks and more than 800 confirming banks across the world, together with their subsidiaries throughout the world. So I think pretty much global in mind when we first designed it.
So the corporates in the room should pay attention that right down into the really difficult emerging markets, the development banks have a reach. And it's not just big projects, it's small, right? You know, I've seen the programs do transactions for a few $1,000s actually at one point in time. But getting into the pandemic, Yousra, you know, challenges, we've heard about them all morning, and many institutions, banks cutting their limits and taking a conservative approach with maybe good reason or whatever. But what about Ebrd? How about your support, your business? Did you slow down, speed up, change direction? How was business, how were your supports in the last 2 years?
No, thank you for that. And just to capitalize a little bit on what colleagues were saying, I think when the pandemic struck, it was difficult for everyone. It was very obvious that the disruption of the supply chains were causing a lot of problems, and we've seen the commercial banks pull back a little bit from the scene. And given the nature of our work, given the nature of our mandate, that's exactly when we needed to step up. And that's exactly what we've done. We've launched what we call solidarity packages, which were really emergency injections and liquidity packages that we've offered. And I can tell you that 2021 and 2020, so those past 2 years of the pandemic, we've seen a real surge in our business operation because we did step up and take more risk, even more risk than what we usually do in order to support the economies where we operate.
So if you're saying stepping up, do you mean it probably was your biggest outstandings in the program since it started in '99?
Absolutely.
Really?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And we've done record
Well,
investments.
congratulations. That's really great job. So, Laura, what about the IFC? Did you step out or did you step in? What was your reaction in terms of supporting trade into all these emerging markets?
Right, I think crises like this really bring out the counter-cyclical role of the MDBs. If anything in my history with the institution, whenever there is a crisis, that's actually when I have more work than less. And it's not because we have spare money to throw around, right? We do not have subsidies or donor funding to fund us. We need to earn our living. So, and the reason that we are able to do is because through the years we have been able to develop the expertise and the knowledge about assessing risks in the frontier countries, which helps us a lot in the crisis situations. And just to illustrate, when the pandemic unfolded, during the first 3 months, our trade business doubled. And then this year in the middle...
The trade business doubled?
Doubled.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow, that's amazing.
And then this year, for example, in MENA, we had an additional 25% increase on top of that. So, and during that time, we continue pushing frontiers. Just a couple of illustrations. Since the beginning of pandemic, we opened at approved lines, trade lines, with 2 banks in Yemen, 2 banks in Ethiopia, and a bank in Djibouti. And this is during the pandemic, this is during the challenging times in the country. So we do push the envelopes. And with our track record and our approach, we are bringing in our partners into that space as well.
Okay, well, that prompts a very interesting question for me. Do you guys compete or collaborate? Laura, maybe I'll leave you still with this.
Of course we compete. That's a very friendly competition. I think competition, as in any business, it's good for us. It keeps us honest. It pushes our skills, our knowledge, our approach and products is good for the clients. Having said that, we also have a lot of need in the market which neither of any MDBs can ever meet possibly, and so we collaborate a lot. In fact, one of the core KPIs for IFC is mobilizing other partners. For example, if I bring in Ebrd for a transaction, I get internal credit for that. The more recent and very relevant example is the joint commitment between MDBs and World Trade Organization to increase and step up the trade, where the indicated number is 13 billion. But also collaborating in capacity building of the companies in terms of also understanding better the barriers to trade. Africa is a big topic for us, so really deep dive on understanding what is holding back the trade.
Well, that's wonderful. So I could say collaboration, but a little bit of friendly competition. Yes. Yeah, pretty good. So getting on to something really, really important here, and that is recent news that the UAE became the 72nd shareholder in the Ebrd. Now, this is huge news, actually, and huge news. Well, let's hear Yousra, what impact or what can we expect from this, or what will be the direction?
Thank you for that. As you said, so the UAE just recently joined at the end of last year as our 72nd shareholder, and we're very glad and excited about that. First of all, we believe that our core imperatives and strategic imperatives as Ebrd and for our mandate are very much aligned with the UAE, and this in terms of supporting entrepreneurship, innovation, inclusion, green transition economy, and those are very much aligned. So we do believe that them accessing our shareholder base will definitely open the door for further opportunities in regions where we invest. They are, at the end of the day, a very important knowledge and business hub. So capitalizing on that, we are very much looking forward to expand our business together. Just so that I clarify, I mean, they are not a recipient country, but they are really a partner where that will accompany us throughout our regions.
Okay, that's really interesting. So I guess seeing UAE as a hub, I'm just dreaming here, but you probably have your sights also on sub-Saharan Africa at some point in the future, or am I jumping the gun here?
I think, I mean, Ebrd is a young moving animal at the end of the day, and we've always had this expansionary mindset in mind. So there are still needs in our core regions where we operate, but we definitely recognize that there are needs elsewhere. So
okay, really interesting. I always considered myself a young moving animal as well, but I'm not quite sure it applies anymore. So Laura, moving on to you, I know the IFC is always good for surveys, and you did a survey which has been, I've heard a bit about on the impact of the pandemic and some of the challenges. I don't want to go discussing a detailed survey, but maybe a few key points or a few messages that came out, because it's very, very recent.
Yes, and similarly to Ebrd's trade program, our program is global. So we talked to our partner banks across the globe. So the survey was across the globe. And what we see, 90 to 98% of our partners indicate that their clients experienced either severe cash problems, cash shortages, or operational challenges. Almost 50%, 45% to be precise, indicated that they needed greater support for trade finance specifically for their clients. And so that kind of panned out what we saw in our numbers as well. But that also came clear in terms of our analysis is that the impact on financial sector was slightly delayed. For example, in MENA, the impact in our partner banks, we started to see only middle last year. So, and part of that is that the banks were very quick to react and shore up the liquidity. And we saw a lot of our partner banks to take steps to do that, to weather the crisis better. And so the impact shows up later. The other side of that is that the impact is going to taper off a little bit longer. So we are going to, and banks expect that it may take another year or two for this really tapering off and moving back to more normal in terms of also trade finance and financial funding for companies.
Great, great answer, and I guess challenging, very challenging, but looking to something positive, because I'm curious. Yousra, we've heard so much, I've heard so much about the Ebrd's e-learning program in trade finance, an award-winning program, I'll have you know, and it has training, everything, letters of credit, guarantees, standbys, SCF, and it's supposed to be really good. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
I think thank you for bringing this up. Back in 2010 when we launched it, we really had in mind the digitalization of our technical assistance, which I think was a bit ahead of time. And digital transformation wasn't really core at the time. However, the way we were perceiving it is that our e-learning platform was really a way to support collective learning, basically between our participants and countries, etc. And I think with the pandemic and with everyone moving towards social distancing and virtual interactions, I think that's when we really saw a surge in and increased demand for our e-learning programs. And today we have more than, I think, 9,000 alumni, with more than 400 partner banks across 40 countries. So it's quite an old program, in digital terms. However, very successful and very much in demand.
Great, that's really an amazing success story that we'll be hearing more about. And Laura, but maybe moving forward from here with the IFC, what interesting news or what should we be paying attention to with the IFC moving forward?
So we are putting our foot on the gas pedal to going forward. So we have committed ourselves to increasing our trade finance from currently we have done about 200 billion, and this includes trade finance, working capital, supply chain finance. And we are aiming to increase it by almost 50% by the end of the decade, another 90 billion. Now the question is how we are going to do that. There are a number of things. We of course will continue to do the bread and butter, the main business, but we will push envelope, and that goes in terms of tenors, increasing the tenors. An interesting phenomenon that we realized during the pandemic was longer tenure trade finance instruments between 1 to 5 years for equipment imports. We actually had that.
That's pretty new, isn't it? That's
yes.
Okay.
So we actually had that program open since 2012. Nobody was interested. Everyone was happy with regular products. We did first transaction in 2019, pre-COVID, and that was in Armenia. But then when the COVID started, we really started to see an increase in the demand. And so in countries, Egypt, which is generally a lot of established trade where our program is not really needed, there is a lot of interest in these longer-term trades. We are looking at supporting imports in Iraq via our Jordanian partners for the longer-term instruments. The other one would be partnering with the platforms. Yesterday, a very interesting session about the supply chain financing platform. So we are looking at ways to partner with them. The digital is big. We are also looking at strengthening our push for gender diversity and equality. If you look at the rejection rates, for SMEs, trade finance rejection rates are about 40%. For female-owned, it's 70%. So we have partnered with Goldman Sachs, where Goldman Sachs Foundation, where they are doing interest rate rebate for trade finance with female-owned businesses. So we will continue pushing that. And then finally, similarly as Ebrd, working on building the capacity and technical assistance to build the businesses up.
That's wonderful. And just for the record, so we know on GTR's records, I'm doing my thing for the gender balance here. There's only me and two ladies here with me. So I've done a lot here right now. So, just something prompted by our last panel. I know sustainability and digitalization are really paramount for both of you. We've talked a bit about digitalization, and a lot have. So in terms of sustainability, a question we got earlier on was, is there a preferential angle on green transactions, or maybe Yousra, both of you can comment.
No, I think it will pretty much be a common answer here, because I mean we've just at the Ebrd approved our new strategic approach for the coming years last year, and at the core of it is the green transition, obviously, and inclusion as key imperatives. I think we're very much aligned and under pressure to deliver green, and similarly to all the multilaterals who are supporting, obviously, the Paris Alignment Agreements. And I would assume that Laura has exactly the same.
Laura, yeah?
Yes, we have great push for green, all things green, climate in terms of trade, but beyond. We had adopted the Green Equity Platform. We are signatories to Paris Agreement. We are rolling it out. We are actually leading the group of MDBs where we have jointly working on implementing the Paris alignment. So it's top of our agenda.
Wonderful. I'm glad to hear the focus on green, because I'm Irish, and you know everything in Ireland is green as well. So things are looking up. So Yousra, finally with you, moving forward, Ebrd, any news you want to share with us or ideas?
I think, as I said, we're very much a young institution who's looking to explore new territories. So let's see where that will bring us. But if I can just add, and because Laura was discussing the friendly competition, yes. I think in instances where we discuss key important factors like green and inclusion, this is exactly where the collaboration works. This is exactly where we have mutual understanding and initiatives to push the needle, try to push the needle a little bit further. So a lot of collaboration will certainly be discussed in the coming periods.
Okay, wonderful. And I hope you enjoyed this discussion because just to let you know that in 1 month exactly from now, in the week of the 14th of March, 14, 15, 16, and 17, and 18, we have the Global Trade Facilitation Summit taking place in Dubai. And actually it's supported again by Dubai Chamber, ICC UAE, and GTR have given us an awful lot of assistance in how we structure it, how we manage it. It will involve participation of the Asian Development Bank, the Ebrd, the IFC, the Islamic Trade Finance Corporation. But for the exporters here, it's really interesting because they're inviting issuing banks from their countries of operation. So they'll be coming to Dubai, markets that you would think you cannot reach because the risk is too high for your $20,000 transaction, okay, or whatever. It's possible. It can be done with the support of IFC, Ebrd, ADB, etc. So put that in your diary. You're all invited back, and I think we're going to have a great event. What do you think?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Really looking forward to, and I believe our senior management is coming as well.
Good, and also Ebrd and ADB. So I said I'd be short. If I had any questions, I'd be happy to take one. There's one here. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Kamlesh Thakur. I'm from Bombay. And yesterday we heard mention of the MDBs coming in with standby LCs. Could you elaborate from your institutions, how would you be able to work on doing that? Because you mentioned the contribution of the new parameters of the $200 billion funds and all this just now.
I can maybe start on this one. It's a very innovative, but a very simple. But simple is good because I'm very simple as well. It's a very simple program, but it's really, really good. It's like this: if you had an importer in Tajikistan or in Morocco or Tunisia, so you have the importer, right? And you're going to ship, and you're going to ship, for example, under a letter of credit, but it doesn't have to be an LC. But it just explains it the easiest. So you're going to be getting an LC from Morocco or from Tajikistan, Uzbekistan or something. You're getting the LC. But of course, most likely you want to get a confirmation. Yeah, you're nodding. So, and most likely if it's a USENS LC, you'll want to discount it. So this is just a normal thing. But very often, banks, commercial banks, don't have limits for these smaller banks in these more difficult markets. But the mandate of the development banks, IFC, Ebrd, is to support them. So this means if you're taking that support, you're taking on a risk that may be not bankable with a commercial bank. And I know you're wondering, when am I going to answer your question? But I'm going to answer it now. So the way the structure works is one of the issuing banks or the confirming bank will contact Ebrd. We have a transaction, will you support it? And I know you all reply very, very quickly, within 1 day, always, and usually in a matter of hours. So it's okay saying we'll support it, but this is the trick, okay, or this is the mechanics. When the LC has been issued, you need the confirmation, okay? So if Ebrd or IFC, it's the same model, support the transaction with the standby, what happens is Ebrd, IFC issue a standby letter of credit in favor of the confirming bank, covering the possible risk of default by an issuing bank on the underlying instrument. So clearly the risk has moved very nicely from Uzbekistan, Tajikistan to Ebrd, AAA rated. There's never been any defaults at all. It's a wonderful program. And then the letter of credit goes through its merry life. No involvement, Ebrd, ADB, IFC. You present the documents, you get your money. But in the event of a default, should it happen, you claim on Ebrd, IFC, and you get your money. Is that okay, Kamlesh?
No.
That's a very interesting question that comes up, and the answer is kind of, well, answer is kind of yes and no. In most typical transactions, the answer is no, because all that's happening is the issuing bank wants a confirmation, they approach them, they support it. But sometimes in larger, more complicated transactions, people are to figure out how to structure a deal. And, people say, maybe this would work on the Ebrd program. So occasionally, but kind of the rule of thumb day by day is no, but sometimes yes. And
I can just add that the last point would be more on these longer term transactions, because those are longer term, that's slightly different risk profile. Excuse me?
Are they also more effective on repetitive transactions?
So for these long-term, larger
Which is why
tickets,
the SBLCs
those
come
are
in.
one-off, right? So the client may have repetitive relationship with the client bank, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the client bank or the confirming bank would be looking for cover from us just because they have established relationship, right? That's your bank would determine whether they need that cover.
yeah, but Kamlesh, I think I got your question. Like the easiest way to kind of get it straight, well, I get it straight, is you know, for every underlying instrument, every LC, okay, every evaluation of a bill that's going to be discounted, every counter guarantee, there will be a standby. You know, I know you're thinking one standby covering a low. It generally doesn't work like that. It's generally standby per transaction, but it is possible. But generally, it's one standby per instrument.
At the end of the day, does the supplier get the comfort of knowing that that bank will pay at the end of the day? I mean, that's something.
Well, the answer to that question is this. If you're a supplier in Ireland, for example, just because I'm Irish, you know, despite the wonderful IFC and despite the wonderful EBRD, an exporter from Ireland, I don't know anything about EBRD, I don't know anything from IFC, and I really don't want to know. I just want my bank to confirm the letter of credit, okay? So by the EBRD IFC doing the standby in favor of my bank then, because the risk has shifted from Uzbekistan or wherever it is to EBRD, my bank adds the confirmation, my bank, and normally I present my documents to them. I don't know and I don't even care about IFC or EBRD because I've got the undertaking of my local bank. But it's a very good question for clarification, and I'm really glad you asked it. Yeah, very good.
So
oh, sorry, please.
So I guess you are asking a question about the situation where you don't trust your own bank, right, to make the payment. That's the tricky one. So when we do partner with the banks, we do full due diligence. When we open the trade lines, it's the same due diligence as long-term lines that we do. So we really do a thorough job. Yeah. Now, having said that, if there is a bank who we do not work with, it doesn't mean that that's a bank that cannot be trusted, right? It's just a bank we don't work with, right? So you shouldn't infer any information from the fact that IFC is not involved.
Don't worry, Laura. It's not the bank Kamlesh doesn't trust. It's me, okay? so we can deal with that. So, Laura, Yousra, thank you very much for your time and attention and wonderful answers. Could we give them a round of applause?
Thank you for having us.